All right. Hello. Welcome to Meet the Authors. We're here with a couple of additional authors that are going to give us some insights into writing, and we're going to discuss craft and kind of give them an opportunity to introduce some of their work. So we're meeting with Dale Lehman. Lehman, did I say your last name correctly?
Lehman.
Lehman.
Yeah.
Okay, and Daniel Martin. Hey, Dan. I guess let's get started. The way we normally proceed is usually my co-host, who has actually been summoned for some emergency work, and I will discuss a novel or recent literature that we've read. We collaborate on the side. So I guess since he's not here to defend his perspective, you're going to get all of my view. So here goes. All right, so we read The Hail Mary Project over the last couple of weeks. I think you might be familiar with Andy Weir. He's the author of The Martian, and I haven't read The Martian. I did see the movie, and the movie was a lot of fun. I thought it was great, but you didn't get a lot of the in the head communication, the stuff that the main character is experiencing. In the Hail Mary Project is kind of told, I think, in a similar way. And there's just you have one protagonist who is stuck in this mission to save humanity, and it's got an interesting twist on how that came to be. One of the things that grabbed me about this book is that I was thoroughly entertained, and I actually put down other activities to listen to this book. So for instance, like when I'm working out, I'll watch a movie or something on Netflix. I skip all of that stuff, and I'm like, I just want to see I want to find out what happens next in the book. So the book definitely keeps going, and it keeps you engaged. He is on a spaceship. He has been wakes up basically alone, isolated. So it's one of those great classic horror / sci-fi intros. What comes to mind is Day of the Triffids, when the guy wakes up in the hospital bed with the bandage around his head. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but hopefully some of the audience out there is familiar with that classic science fiction piece. So it kind of thrusts you right into the middle, and then it builds two storylines at the same time. One is, how did he get there, which is explained through the course of the novel on one story arc. And the other story arc is, okay, how is he actually going to accomplish his mission, or is he? Because he wakes up alone, and his other two co-pilots or people that were supposed to be helping him on this mission didn't quite make it through. He wakes up in the spaceship, and he's completely alone and can't remember even what his name is. So, and he's got to somehow get from there to being able to remember enough about why he's even there to make a difference in his homeland, which at this point is 13 years away by travel. So there are a lot of intense moments, and everything built on itself. I really enjoyed this book. I didn't want to, because I'm the type that I'm a little jealous of Andy Weir. He's very successful. He's got tons of stuff published, but I liked it. I enjoyed it a lot. And I think probably most people will. And it's not one of those and it's a book that's accessible, I think, to most people, because the main character is ultimately someone who has a very kind of sanitized perspective, not perspective, but there's not a lot of cursing in it. There's not a lot of graphic violence. So it's a good book for people who maybe even non-traditional science fiction and horror aficionados. So I'd recommend taking some time to read it. That's my 2 cents. All right.
I can't add anything to that because I haven't read it. Like you, I didn't read The Martian either. I saw the movie, and I thought it was a good movie. But you probably can't really see all of my shirt here. It says the book was better than the movie. So I thought the movie was good, so probably the book is better.
Yeah, I think I am going to go pick up The Martian now, because I read this, and there's just so much that happens that's not it's hard to get those one character get in somebody's head without doing the voiceover narration bit, and the voiceover narration can get a bit dry, I feel, when you try to do that in movies. So maybe I will go back and pick that one up. All right. So since there's no counter proposal there, let's move on. All right, let's start with Dale. Let's start with you. We're here to talk about just writing stuff, not specifically, you know, a book or anything like that. We're just the craft of writing, the general like ecosystem. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your latest work and like, where did it come from?
Okay, well, in the promos you put out for this show, you were mentioning Space Operatic, and Space Operatic is actually not my latest work. It's my next to latest work. That was published last year, early 2000, if I remember right. The novel I just published is a completely different tale called Weasel Words. And I can talk about either one of them or both of them, but to kind of go along with the science fiction theme, let's stick with Space Operatic for the moment. Well, I've been writing for a long time, and I was very interested when I was young in astronomy and later physics. And in fact, I wanted to actually go into astronomy as a profession. That didn't actually pan out. When I got into high school, I discovered relativity and quantum physics, and I became very interested in those fields, but I never finished college. I met this wonderful young lady who was a terrific editor and who started teaching me how to write. And one thing led to another, and you know how life gets in the way. Well, we kind of shelved our college careers for a little while to get married and start a family, and then we just never got back to that stuff. So I ended up working in computers, computer software programmer. I've been for over 40 years now, but I've been writing that whole time as well. And for my early writing, a lot of it was science fiction, because those were things that I was interested in. I read a lot of Asimov and not so much Heinlein, but I had read some of Heinlein's Juveniles when I was younger and really enjoyed those. I became a big aficionado of Ray Bradbury, who, although he is not strictly a science fiction writer, a portion of what he wrote was science fiction. Arthur C. Clarke and some of the other big names in the
Some
field.
great names, yeah.
and so and my dad had a big collection of science fiction, some of which I'm still reading my way through because I'm such a slow reader. But I started writing science fiction stories, and primarily that's what I wrote, short stories, science fiction. Eventually, I kind of grew a little bit tired of the direction that the field was taking in the 1990s, however, and it seemed to me that it had lost a lot of its optimism, and a lot of what was being written was very dark and dismal futures and things that I just didn't like. So I stopped reading it, and I started reading mysteries, which, although many mysteries are dark and dismal stories, at the end, things are put right. You know,
Sure.
The murderer is caught and stopped. So I began writing mysteries as well after reading them for a while. And for a time, I actually didn't write any science fiction at all. There's another piece to that story which gets really long and involves a agent who was more of a con artist than an agent, but we'll skip that for now. And just say,
we'll come back to that.
I went through like a 10-year period when I didn't write because I had such a bad experience.
Okay.
When I did start writing, what came out was my first novel that I published, which was the Fibonacci Murders, and Janet may be the one that you picked up on the promo when you joined my newsletter. And I've written 2 more, and I've got a 4th one in that series going right now. But at a certain point, I started thinking, I really would like to write science fiction again, because I always just loved the field, at least prior to the 1990s I did. And so I was casting around for something, and I think I was actually just looking through some stuff online about the science fiction genre in general, and the subgenre of space opera came up. And I was looking at that, and I thought, space opera. Now, my wife is very much into music and opera. And I thought, space opera in space. That's an interesting idea.
The acoustics.
Space opera
would be great.
That.
You know, in fairness, I saw a zombie opera film not too long ago. If I can remember the name, I'll tell it to you. But there's a niche there somewhere. I'm sorry, continue.
So space operatic, it became I couldn't take it seriously. So it became a humorous novel in which there is a spacefaring opera company in which the owner, Roberto Maccarone. Now, do any of you know Italian? I don't either. I looked this up though. Roberto Maccarone, who has this Italian last name, which basically means fool or idiot, is the owner of this opera company. And he decides that he's been making a name for himself on Mars, but he can only go so far with that. He wants to go someplace where there's basically no competition. So he goes to the very edge of the solar system, out in the Oort cloud. Do you know what the Oort cloud is? Okay, it's the realm at the very distant edge of our solar system where it is believed that comets originate. And so I put mining colonies out there that are mining the comets, and it has a very much of a kind of a Wild West sort of thing where it's lawless. It's the authorities are very weak. There is a very powerful corporate interest that owns a lot of the mining, controls a lot of the mining out there. And Roberto Maccarone takes his opera company into the midst of all of this to sell culture to them, which is about the stupidest idea you can imagine. But that's what he does because he thinks that if he can make it big there, the sky's the limit.
Sure. I'm thinking Firefly right now and trying to sell culture in some of those places.
So what he ends up doing, because he can't, I couldn't really make an entire novel around opera because that would probably bore most people. What I did is I put opera into a novel that involves, and I don't remember all the points that I have in my blurb for the book, but corporate greed, rebellious miners, bloodthirsty mercenaries, inane conversations, annoying androids, and more unintended consequences than you can shake a baton at. That's roughly how the blurb goes. It's basically everything that can possibly go wrong for him goes wrong. And he finds himself in the middle of what is kind of a war, really, between corporate interests and the miners and one thing and another. And so everybody who is trying to get what they want ends up making a big mess of things. And in the midst of all this, this opera company comes, and the one thing that they can do to guarantee their success is play at this theater that has been built out there. And this theater is for whatever reason, it's the greatest theater in the entire solar system. What it's doing out there, nobody knows. And it's never been used. And the culture minister who controls the thing won't let anybody in. Now, I'm not going to tell you why, because that's the big secret of this novel. But that is in a nutshell is the whole story. And does he get what he wants or not? I mean, if he doesn't, he's in a really bad place because he can't make any money out there if he doesn't succeed. If he doesn't succeed, he can't pay his people, and they're all stuck there. Yeah, so, and nobody likes it.
That's entertaining. Yeah, I've added your book to my list. You're on my read list, definitely. I have a couple more. I have a pretty long list, but I'm entertained by the idea, and I can't wait to get to it.
As far as weasel words go, I won't go into that in detail right now, although if you want to ask me about it later, you can. But I'll just say that is also a humorous novel, but it's not science fiction. It's a crime novel featuring a husband and wife pair of thieves who get drawn into a fairly ridiculous crime that involves a really annoying rich family.
That sounds awesome. That's one of the things that I'm trying to do is like add humor. When you were talking about the dark, like sci-fi stuff that's been happening in the late 90s, that's kind of, I actually like that stuff. And that's the direction I want to go, but I think that it gets too heavy. And I think that's part of the problem is like, we forget to lighten it up a little bit so that people can actually, have little moments of like relief during these journeys. So I admire the ability to write humor. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, Dale and I had a short chat after we both found out we were going to be doing this interview shared about how I have an inability to write humor into things. And with the book I'm going to talk about today, there's a lot of drama and tragedy. And it's all existential fiction, so it's dark, but it's not just amusement dark. It's dark to show the dark side to humanity.
Sure.
But in the last story of the collection, I was like, I got to brighten this stuff up a little bit. And I really wanted to put that one in there as something that will like kind of restore faith in humanity at the end of the novel. And with the prisoners being in like this kind of like sci-fi jail cell, it's moderate sci-fi and that is not realistic, where there's a autonomous robot system that's in control of their sentence. There's two prisoners that are in the cell for crimes against humanity. And when they need things like food, it kind of just appears in this little box, and then the table and chairs appear. So that's the kind of sci-fi aspect of it. And after their first night, they wake up and they realize that they don't have to empty their bowels. And there's a slight bit of dialogue about, oh, that's actually kind of convenient. Like maybe it's not so bad that the robot's taking care of everything for us, because they're deleting everything that's inside of us and we don't have to take care of it. And I think that that's the closest I've ever gotten in a published book, at least, to add any humor. So I'm not even sure if I did it very well. It's, yeah.
Well, what about, and tell us a little bit more about Althea's dreams. Like where does that come from? Like
Comes from a lot of places. It comes from a lifetime of studying philosophy and realizing that not everyone takes pleasure in torturing themselves to explore ideas to that kind of extent that most people who write philosophy have written in, at least in the last few centuries. I find a lot of Greek playwrights and Greek philosophers were a little bit more approachable and a little bit more digestible for common people and how they approached it. But it seems like in the Enlightenment, things just took off and became very abstract for most people. So my first book was a travel diary in kind of like an experimental phenomenology, which means it's looking at how the individual subject of consciousness approaches life and understands their world around them. It's a very fancy word to basically talk about that. And when I published it, I realized that there was such a limited audience for nonfiction philosophy, and that if I had ideas that I thought were valuable to humanity, writing hardcore philosophy was going to hit this little niche area of academia, and they were all going to argue with me about it for eternity, and that would be my fate. And I was like, yeah, this isn't really going to go anywhere. But I'd long written fiction just for fun, for my own amusement, kind of to weigh out the heaviness of studies. And I was in a philosophy of fiction class in my undergrad at University of Hawaii, and that was when I got introduced to Camus. And we had to read L'Étranger, The Stranger, in that class. And that was what really opened my eyes, that along with like Madame Bovary, that really opened my eyes to, oh, you can write non-argumentative arguments. You can expose ideas, you can put up multiple points of reflectivity and argument. And it's funny because this is Plato. Plato does this. He opens up dialogues. It's like a play. It's a scene. It's so human. But most academic philosophers today would think philosophical fiction is not a means to convey things, but then everyone worships Plato because you can't not have a reverence for what he did.
Right. There's a like logical proof thing that you see that's like you've got to nail everything down to and explain every single term to like the nth degree. And yeah, man, that's
Aristotle shit. Aristotle ruined philosophy. He made categories, he made everything specific and all definitive and an inclusive system. And Plato was really like a living philosopher. So after I published my first book, I quit my job. I was working in Laguna Beach, California at a fish restaurant. And I was like, you know what? I have some money in the bank, tips. I'm going to go on the road. So I took off for about 2 months. Half stayed with family and friends and camped and hiked all over the place. And I was writing fiction by the campfire while I was out there. And I stopped at some cousins who live just north of the bay in like Monterey, or not Monterey, Santa Rosa. And they found out a place I was going to camp was right by Jack London State Park. And I had 2 Jack London books with me. So I was like, cool, I'll go stop there. And that was really like where the big inspiration for this book happened, in wanting to take philosophy and make it digestible, already having an interest in fiction and some introductory writings. But then how to make the content came about at Jack London State Park, where I saw his little office on his farm. Dude, Jack London's a badass. He traveled the world as a correspondent. He brought terracing the hillsides for wine production to Napa Valley and to Northern California wineries. And he
Wow.
had this huge estate, like 130 acres or something, where he built a dam and he grew lots of food, and he wrote a lot of work while he lived there. And so I'm like in his little house, and he has this big office with 3 desks, and one is for personal correspondence, another one is for farm business, and the other one's for writing. And the docent said that Jack London would spend an hour or so, and he'd write 1,000 words at the fiction desk first thing every day. And I remember thinking, wow, that's so much. And I told myself, when I'm done with my road trip, I'm going to do it. So I finished my road trip, got on a plane, shipped my truck to Maui, lived in Maui for a couple of years. And I kept doing it, writing 1,000 words a day. And I was keeping a blog at the time. And I probably published between like 65, 70 or so stories, and kept working on developing characters, plot sequences, all the little mechanisms of fiction. And this was around 2015, 2016. And so I was like, I'm getting pretty good at this. I want to make a book that's a collection of these stories. And with Trump being, on the campaign trail at the time, I wanted to make an ironic title that would serve as a critique of modernity and a critique of what certain ideologies outside of just politics, but as societal foundations and societal pillars might have to offer us. So I wanted to title the book Great America. And it was going to be a critique of modern American capitalism and how we end up selling our humanity short to partake in this crazy rat race, keeping up with the Joneses. Over the years, Trump was president and I was still writing the book. So I ended up saying, I don't want to do this ironic title. I want to do something more fun. So I switched it over to Alethea's Dreams. And Althea is a Greek goddess of truth. And Michel Foucault, if you're familiar with him, philosopher and sociologist, he wrote a book called Courage to Truth. And in it, he talks about how truth has become dangerous in society because authority systems and institutions will kill people who speak truth because it doesn't serve their agenda. And so I thought, sorry, a little loud.
That's
so
fine.
I thought that that there might be a nice way to slide over this critique that I started out with into something that revolves around how we shelve our own inner truths so that we can partake in things that might not have our best interests at heart, in games that are rigged against us. And so Alethea's Dreams then started to become an investigation into how we become disconnected from ourselves, from our real passions and desires, and how that gets in between us and other people that we interact with in our lives, and where those weird value systems create these buffer zones between us and others, and how ultimately that's linked to all of our relationship with nature, the natural world, and life itself.
Oh, interesting.
So each of the stories is a different angled investigation into the sociological, political, economic things that separate us from being a very intelligent animal species on planet Earth, as a general critique of modernity.
That's awesome. Well, I think through the like fiction, I think allows you to do more than, I mean, if you gave me that synopsis and then you plopped a nonfiction book down in my hand, in my lap, I don't know that I would be able to get through it. But
Yeah.
But if you're approaching that from a perspective of fiction, do you feel like that gives you an opportunity to actually have a conversation with the reader and convey more of your message than otherwise?
Totally. Yeah. When I wrote my master's thesis, I studied philosophical anthropology and philosophy of culture. I really wanted to write about fiction and its ability to change our cultural paradigms. And after hitting a million roadblocks in my thesis and what's approved by academia to write about, that ended up getting written out. But I thought it was really interesting, and I played with this idea a lot of what's called fictional ontology. So ontology in philosophy is a fancy word for being. So things that exist have an ontological nature. And fiction provides us with this as if world, as a philosopher named Paul Vane talks about. And it's really interesting how you can create an as if world that you can play through all the ideas. You can have a character who takes one side of the argument and then another one who's the antithetical. And that's what Plato's dialogues do. as a means of working out in a parallel universe almost how things might play out with different characters, different motivations, different values, and make it fun and embodied and enlivened, but in this as if fictional ontology rather than just in the concrete world that we live in.
Sure, absolutely. That reminds me of a movie that I saw that was basically exactly that. When Galaxies Collide. I don't know if I don't know how many of us have actually seen it, but it's kind of these people that are essentially stranded in this place, that's this nondescript place that's somewhere in the universe, and each one has this perception of where they are, and and the conversation is basically them trying to figure out where they are and understand some context of being. It's a very kind of meta, but it's a lot of fun if you get a chance.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. Okay, so we also try to, and that's called, I don't think we mentioned the title once. That's Althea's Dream.
Yeah, Alethea's Dreams.
Okay, cool. A lot of authors like cruise through some of our back episodes and get like tips here and there on what to do and what not to do in their budding careers. So all of us here, I think, have gotten to the point where we've at least made some progress in publishing. Is there something, and let's round robin this one, about 2 minutes each. Is there something that you wish you'd known when you first started writing that you feel like you can share and make somebody's life a little easier?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I started writing way early, so probably nothing would have helped at that point. But I think that probably the most profound thing I've ever run across, and this was I think it was in Writer's Digest that I ran across this a long time ago, that in order to be good at writing, you have to write approximately 1 million words. Now, the exact number doesn't matter, but if you break that number down, 1 million words is roughly 5 novels. Of course, a lot of us write short stories and as well as novels and other short forms. But the thing that I see them happening a lot, and it's, as we were talking about, we all do this. We write something, we think it's great, and then 20 years later, we go back and look at it and we're like, ugh, because we've learned so much in 20 years of writing. But if you're just starting out, the thing to remember is that you probably, unless you're a prodigy, you probably are not writing really well to begin with. You have to write a lot in order to get to that point. So the thing is not to write and rush to publish. The thing is to write, revise, edit, write some more, and keep doing that until you can get to a point where you can hand something to somebody and they come back and who is honest with you, they come back and say that is good, because a lot of people, as we know, don't want to hurt our feelings, so they aren't actually honest with us.
Yeah, that's tricky. Yeah. What about you, Dan? What do you think?
Yeah, so many lessons, especially doing indie publishing. You know, when you want full creative control and you learn how to do everything. I think that the advice I would give to new writers, along with what Dale said, I especially the rewriting process. Write. Like I wrote so many stories on my blog before I got to the level of writing that I wanted to put in my book. Rewrite, write something that's great, come back, walk away for 2 weeks, come back, you'll add more texture. Is that patience is best after the launch. That wanting to hit goals right away, wanting to be famous right away. I'm on a lot of Facebook writing groups, and people are like, how do I sell thousands of copies right away? And you know, if you're in a rush to write and you're in a rush to sell, you're going to miss some of like the actual process of growth that occurs when you're writing, when you're making new contacts, when your work is spreading. So I think that I wish that I could go back in time and tell myself to be more patient. And I wish that I could pop up every morning above myself and tell myself to be patient. But yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing is patience and the rewrite process. And I think that that's something that a lot of people with coronavirus, we've all had life go on pause. A lot of people have decided to write a book in that time. Great use of your time. But not just the writing, the rewriting and the rewriting and the rewriting until you really have everything you want in there, sequenced properly, proofread properly,
Right.
by yourself and at least one other person. That's my advice. I've seen a lot of authors in the author groups in particular who skipped the proofreading part, and they might have a brilliant concept and they might have great characters and a fun plot, but I don't think it's just my academic background. I think a lot of people, when you get 5 or 6 pages into a book and you notice that there's a plethora of typos, even if you like it, it can be so hard to take it to a serious extent. So yeah, that's my advice. Put the money in on a good editor. If you don't have a partner like Dale's wife as his editor, my partner is my editor as well, to catch the last things I couldn't get.
My wife too.
Yeah, we were very lucky to have that.
No doubt.
Lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a convenient arrangement if you have it. The big problem is that, as I mentioned before, people who know you, they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they are generally not the people to go to for input on your writing. In my case, I'm lucky because my wife doesn't care. She will take a red pen and slash everything that I've written.
Yeah.
And she doesn't care that it hurts me. Because she's doing me a favor, and I asked her to do it. And so, sometimes it is painful, but that's a part of the process too. You have to go through that in order to actually grow. One other thing that comes to mind, my wife and I, we actually ran a publishing house for a while. I still have my own imprint. We started a company to publish, as a specialty publisher. I'm a Baha'i, my religion. And so we were publishing books written by other Baha'i authors, and most of them were nonfiction on subjects dealing with the Baha'i faith. And we ran that for 9-10 years before health and financial issues reared their ugly heads and we had to get out of it. But one thing that I learned in the course of doing that is that today, with all the technology that we have, it is extremely easy to publish a book. Anybody can do it, and everybody does. The hard thing is selling a book.
Right.
It is never easy to sell a book unless your last name is a hyphenated last name like King Rowling Steele. Then you can sell the most idiotic stuff because people know your name and they will buy it on the strength of your name. But if you don't have that kind of name,
Right,
it is really difficult. You have to have a good product. And if you're going to be serious about marketing, you have to learn about marketing and get into it. And that's something that most of us writers hate. And I'm not,
that's my least favorite part.
Yeah, for most of us it is. There's a few gifted souls who actually like it and who are good at it and who can make money writing. But it's a very unrealistic thing to think that your first book out, you're going to make money. I've heard, I mean, I'm still running in the red. Every year, I kept my LLC when we stopped the Baha'i publishing. I kept my LLC and I do my own publishing under that. And every year I report a loss, which rolls through to my taxes. So it helps me reduce my taxes. Day job.
But at the same time, you just spent a bunch of money. So
Right, but you just spent a bunch of money.
And also, it's marginalized because those are your expenses for marketing, for programs that you might use to edit. It's not counting your own labor hours. And I said that to my girlfriend the other day. I was like, yeah, so I would have to sell this many copies to ever like get out of the red. And I was like, oh my God, and that's not billing myself for the hours and the time spent, because I'm gonna have to sell 1 million copies to catch up to myself there.
So what we're all saying is this is a philanthropic effort.
go ahead. Is that good?
Now I have heard,
There you go.
I'll let you know when I get there. I have heard that if you get to the point where you've published about 25 books, then you can start making money, because you've got enough out there that if somebody reads one that they like, then they'll go and they'll read some others.
Yeah.
But
I'm
up to 5 now, so I'm only a 15.
So you're making money.
Well, I've heard it's somewhere between 5 and 10, so you're almost there, Dale.
That's the pessimistic estimate. or the
So
opportunity.
I guess we've informally segued right into the open discussion. I just wanted to make it clear that that's where we are. So continue. Actually, I do want to bring up something. I think, Guy, your book just came out, right?
Yes, just releases officially June 1, so a Monday, but it's available for sale. People have already been buying it, and I've been reading it, and I'm getting good reviews so far. So
Good.
excited. And that was, I think, a really good example of some things that were said, which was I wasn't interested so much in writing and publishing a book. I was interested in writing and publishing a book that I really felt proud of. I really felt could be part of my children's heritage. I really felt that I could, and that took years. That took years of rewriting. That took years and money. I actually hired a very expensive developmental editor that came out of Simon Schuster on one of my first drafts. And I said, I want you to rip it up and then teach me how to put it back together again. And wow, was that humbling. 44 pages of notes and comments on almost every page, and almost a year to basically try and figure out how to make, but it taught me an enormous amount. I think I came out of a professional environment, so this is sort of my third career, and so I was really great at writing executive briefs and bullet points and PowerPoints, but turning a story in writing well, and when you can keep someone's interest for 100 and for 400 pages, that's a different skill, and I'm having to learn that. I had to learn that skill, and I think I'm still learning, but I think I've done well. So the first book was actually Kirkus recommended, which I was really humbled and excited that as an indie author to get a Kirkus recommended out of my first book. Hoping to get a Kirkus star maybe here in the next one or something, but it's a learn process. But the next book is out. It's called The Curse of Cortez. I'm super excited about it. Super fun story. Also takes a lot of archaeology and history and life lessons and philosophy and turns it into an action thriller.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the money to do that kind of thing, that's probably a great way to go. I have never had the money, so my operations have always been very do-it-yourself as much as I can. One good thing with me as well, I'm a software developer, so I want a website, I go build it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
If I want my novel edited, I hand it to my wife. She edits it. So I haven't had to have that, investing a lot of money in it. I have to say, I think there's some good investments, and Guy, it sounds like you made a really good investment there. I've known other people who have just thrown thousands of dollars away, though, on the self-publishing racket. And
yeah, that was my experience.
And that really pains me when I hear stories like that. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. You could have brought it to me. My wife and I could have published this thing for you for a fraction of that.
Yeah.
But,
Dan, you were saying?
Yeah, I went with a vanity publisher my first time because I was 23, 24 years old, and just, I wrote the book, I'll get it to a publisher and it's going to go, and I spent a few $1,000s and they promise the world, and then you find out how little they actually offer you without more and more and more. And then if you want to be successful, it was an offshoot of Simon and Schuster, Archway Publishing.
Yeah.
You're going to be 15, 20,000 in the hole just to really give your book a legitimate launch. And I was like looking at everything that they did and everything they put in the package and how complicated it would be to learn it. And I was like, it's really not actually that hard.
Right.
People are tech savvy these days. You can put together different social media sites and do your own PR, your own website. You can do your own cover design. I use InDesign, and I make my own cover. I do my own interior layout, and just there's a learning curve, sure, but self-taught myself how to do all the things, and you can save so much money and still put out the same quality product.
now, well, there is one place where I have actually spent money though, and that's on covers.
Yeah.
We've tried doing our own cover design, and we think we did okay, but then when we got out of the Baha'i publishing and we just started doing my stuff, I redid the covers for my first 3 Howard County mysteries. I went on to a site. Oh, I had it on the tip of my tongue. Now it blanks. It's gone. 99 Designs, I think, is the name of the
99
website.
Designs. Yeah.
Yeah, and made contact with an artist out there, and he charges me $350 to do the work for a cover, for the paperback cover, the ebook cover, and a couple of marketing graphics, which I think is a really great price.
That is a great price.
And he does fantastic work. I mean, there's just so much difference between hiring somebody who actually is an artist and trying to do it yourself, unless you are an artist. And if you are an artist, you got it made. But on the cover design, I felt it was worth spending that money, because what is a cover? It's a marketing device.
Right.
Yeah.
You mess that up, people won't even pick up your book. And
Yeah.
we had a problem with my first novel, The Fibonacci Murders, and we had a clever cover, but it sent the wrong signal about what was inside the book. So,
yes. So I realized that my colors on Models and Citizens they're pastels, and I have a woman's silhouette on the cover. And so there was some misinterpretation. Somehow that lands in lit RPG, which isn't what Models and Citizens is. It's dystopian science fiction. So lit RPG seekers found it a lot. And then I also, when I started paying attention to what goes into covers and how people interpret them, realized that if you're using pastels, people generally think it's going to be a romance. And there's so much romance crossover into like romance sci-fi, romance thriller, romance horror, that I think that slows down the marketing on that book. Because if you're a romance and you're looking at Models and Citizens, it's not a romance. You're going to be disappointed. So sending the wrong signals is something that we really have to be careful about, I feel like. So
either you need to change the cover or you need to rewrite the novel.
Yeah.
Which is easier?
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm just going to pony up the cash and have somebody do a new cover. But $350 is like, for Bodhi Rising, I spent $365 and I got the cover, and it's a good cover. It definitely tells a story. And so that launches on Sunday. So we'll see how well it does, how well the cover does at attracting attention. But and there's a difference. I mean, you can tell exactly what you're getting when you look at that cover. Like, it's a sci-fi book, and there's a story there. So I definitely, if I have the money, then I will pay for a cover. But for the money that I have very limited funds. So the money that I have goes to editing first, and then if I have money left over, then I'll worry about the cover. What do you guys think? I mean, I that seems to be the trend.
Yeah, that's part of why I liked learning how to build my own cover, because scrolling through Amazon or Goodreads or just in a bookstore, I've realized that there's such like a paradigmatic aspect of what a book cover looks like. And so to a certain extent, there's like 5 or 6 different models, it reminds me of like little Barbie dolls, that they only look so different than each other. It's not very representative of how people really look. And I really don't like the modern directions that cover designs are going in. I actually vastly prefer a 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s kind of design, that where things were a little bit more simple, a bit more wholesome at times, perchance, as well. So I, for my cover, had this idea in my head. And once I had the idea in my head, I was like, how am I ever going to get a cover artist to make this look the way that I want, to make my Althea, whose dreams are the short stories, searching for the truth. And luckily, I coerced my girlfriend to go out in December into, there's a part of Den Haag, which is a big city where I live, called the Haagse Bos, the Den Haag forest. And it was 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And I got her to spend 45 minutes or so, very patient with me while I set my bike up with a flashlight, because I didn't really have very good lighting, and took a series of photos that I eventually found one where I was like, that's the look of looking for truth that I wanted to go with. And I had a first cover that had that photo, but it didn't match everything I wanted. And then in trying to show it to her, I accidentally did something that then became my new cover. So I have a copy here, but it's the Amazon proof. I don't have my author copies yet. But it takes a little bit more of a classic look, and there's a little bit of an overlay of leaves that you can see in it.
Yeah.
It's very subtle, but it's there to make it not just the photo. And that was a total accident that I came up with, and I wanted it to look, like I said, a little bit more classic. And then the leaves go in the back.
Right.
So I don't think that it's awful, but I do think that what some readers are looking for is going to go to what a modern cover design thing looks like. But I kind of like being niche, writing philosophical fiction in the first place. So I wanted to have its own style. And if that cost me a few readers who were going to judge my book by the cover, I like having the artistic control and a story of dragging my girlfriend out while it's freezing outside to take off her jacket and do it in a dress.
Yeah. I think that's a decision that we make. Like, why are we in this? What are we expecting out of writing, all the writing that we do? One of my personal goals is for the writing to pay for itself. So as a focus, you kind of have to consider what the market looks for. If your goal is different than that, then you can let your creative license take over and do what appeals to you, which is awesome. So
yeah, I would advise for most people to do what you and Dale, and I'm assuming Guy probably does as well, which is hire a professional artist. But
I'm certainly doing that, and I need to apologize. I think some guests just pulled up. I heard their motorcycle, but as I'm really loving this conversation. And Janet, I've seen and heard your name somewhere. I'm dying to figure out where. I can't.
Probably on on your mailing list.
That must be it then. But because I'm coming out as a new writer, and I'm writing thrillers, my competition are Dan Brown and James Rawlings and people who are, paying money, $2,000 or more for a designer. And so I felt like I went to Reedsy. I found somebody who I felt had the right look, that kind of thriller kind of look. And he's more expensive, but he also does the interior formatting, and he does the Kindle formatting, and he does gives me probably about 30 different marketing images of different sizes and PNGs. So I think it's a little expensive, but particularly coming out, and I'm always giving him my graphic ideas of what I want, and he changes them somewhat and oftentimes makes them better. But for me, it was so important to really, as my first few books, to establish myself in the market as credible, particularly as an indie author, to say that yes, I'm an indie author, but my books are as good as a Dan Brown, both in how they're written, how they're edited, how they're designed. And that was an investment on my part. And frankly, I'm not making any money right now. I'm kind of bleeding it a little each year, but over time, I'm hoping that will pay off. And since this is my third career that I hope to have until I can't do it anymore, this is sort of an investment into my future and my retirement. So.
Sure. And that's one of the things that I like about like being an author, and especially with the publishing platforms that are out there, is that if you get better, then you have that opportunity to go back and fix the mistakes that you've made and like republish and refresh titles and things like that. And I already know that I'm going to do that with a little bit now. So, but it's just having that opportunity. You can't do that in every profession. So that's kind of unique to what we do.
And I would make a distinction between the writing and the marketing. When you're dealing with the marketing and the cover is a part of the marketing, you definitely have to pay attention to the market, to what people want, how they're going to react to things. In the writing, I tend to not think about those things at all. I know there are people out there who will look at what the trends are and what the markets are doing and try to tailor their writing to things like that. I don't do that. I'm probably just old school or something, I don't know. But going back to, I mentioned Ray Bradbury as one of the authors who was a big influence on me. I mean, I want to be Ray Bradbury when I grow up as a writer. I'm not going to be him, but in my own way, I would like to be as good as he was, which probably will never happen because he was a phenomenon. But his philosophy on writing is basically writing is an extension of life. for him. He pulled all of this stuff out of his own life, and he wrote what he wanted to write. He followed the things that he wanted to follow. He just did it his way, and he didn't care about anybody else. And he learned at a very early age that if you start caring about what other people think, that will kill your creativity. So I tell the stories that I like to tell, and I tell them the way I like to tell them. And if nobody reads them, I'll be disappointed. But that's just the way it is, because I'm not going to change the stories that I tell and how I tell them to conform to market pressures.
Yeah, I think that authenticity is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean to imply that that's what I've done. I think I've really tried to be very true to my stories, but
yeah.
I think I'm a great storyteller. I think I can I think I can learn to be better, to communicate my stories better.
Yes.
And that's what I'm trying to get better at, is the capability of telling my stories. And I think I'm developing my own voice, but really trying to make it an exceptional standout experience for the reader. And that's what I'm working on. And you have Ray Bradbury as your role model. For me, Dan Brown, James Raleigh, and Steve Berry are my role models. Michael Crichton, I mean, those guys I just love. Like, I eat up that stuff.
Well,
I hate to cut this early. This is a wonderful conversation, but I do need to leave. We had company coming in, and they only have a short period of time here.
Sure.
I thought they were going to be here about 10 minutes from now, so I thought I'd have time. But anyway, thank you so much for doing these, Charles. Dan, wonderful to meet with you and to learn about your book. I've seen some of your ads on, I think, Goodreads or something, and I'm fascinated now. So congratulations, and good to meet you.
Thanks, Guy. Nice to meet you as well. Good luck.
Thanks, Guy.
I
Take
give
care.
all too.
Take care.
Bye, all.
See ya. And I think that we're actually coming to the point where we can wrap up here. Thanks everyone for, we covered a lot of ground. I really wish we got more into our inspirations as far as like other authors. Maybe that's something we can cover in a future episode. Feel free to come back. I'll add you guys to the mailing list. Then keep you informed of what's happening. Definitely appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing. I loved it.
All right, great. Thanks, Janet.
Yeah, thanks for dropping in. It was good to meet you.
All right, take care.
Take care.